When looking at the beginnings of Tsubasa's origins, we actually see a very humble beginning of a young boy chasing his dreams, playing Beyblade, and enjoying himself. It's very reminiscent to that of the beginning of the actual Metal Fusion anime, with characters such as Kenta that are just showing that they're trying their best to enjoy it. But from an early age, it was clear that Tsubasa had much good skills for blading, as it's already shown that he's competing in WBBA events by the time he was probably 8 or 10, as his age is never exactly specified, but we can definitely see that he was already a competitive blader at this time. But one thing that is picked up definitely is the lessons he picked up from this time. The first being his love for Beyblade, but second, the willingness of people to do whatever it takes to win, as this would be something that would haunt him as he would get older and into his future. Tsubasa's introduction into Metal Fusion is a rather interesting one, as, like many of the other side characters, episodes are dedicated to kind of showcase their appearance, and Tsubasa does get that, but Tsubasa's appearance is far more grand than it appears to be, as he literally jumps out of the sky in order to save Ginga from out of nowhere from a group of bladers who want to take his points. As Tsubasa quickly and swiftly defeats them without even hesitation, he calls them fake bladers as they all run off. As Ginga thanks him, Tsubasa makes it clear that he doesn't need to thank him too much because he gets what he wanted, that being points, as obviously he's aiming to go to Battle Bladers, as also he introduces himself to Ginga, where he obviously calls him by his name, and explains to him what his bay is, but more importantly he explains that he knows what Ginga wants. As this would lead to a very interesting episode that's supposed to take a span of, I'm assuming, a couple of days, Ginga and Tsubasa go on a short adventure together, journeying together. As this is a very interesting dynamic, because of all the episodes, Ginga tends to be the character who's teaching his friends and everyone else he meets how to be a better blader. But from watching this episode, the first thing that's very paramount is that Tsubasa is really taking the lead away from Ginga, giving him an opportunity to kind of be told a lot of information instead of him speaking, as Tsubasa seems to be more of this big brother or older figure in order to try to guide Ginga or tell Ginga things that he might not know, which is a rather interesting dynamic they pick up, at least for right now. But as the journey progresses, we get to see some interesting dynamics. One, importantly, will be when Tsubasa and Ginga are fishing. Tsubasa teaches Ginga some elements of refining his abilities and skills in nature in order to catch the fish, which he then does. As we reach to the campfire, which I think is a very important aspect of this episode, this is where I think the split dynamic between both of them actually comes into play, where they become more like peers than they do having a superior role figure to each other. This being when Ginga tells Tsubasa about how he learned from his friends and how they keep him going. Tsubasa just clearly mentions, yes, friends. But as Ginga can kind of tell, although Tsubasa is a very strong and competent person, what he's missing is that he's very lonely. As this gets brought up, Ginga does tell Tsubasa that he does have a good friend though, one that's been following him forever, that being the eagle that Tsubasa takes care of, as Tsubasa does mention his feathered friend. As this would culminate with the arrival to the tournament, where both of them find each other battling each other at the finals, as Ginga versus Tsubasa in this episode is obviously done in a really unique way that I don't think can be replicated by a lot of the battles, just because of the way that this was designed. It's rather clear that Tsubasa and Ginga at first are clearly trying to size each other up, but it's very obvious from the start of the battle against specifically Ginga, Tsubasa's already taking the lead. I think this was obviously designed to showcase that Tsubasa may actually be on par with Ginga as stronger bladers keep arriving. But specifically for this instance, it's clear that Ginga has to be on the back foot, as Tsubasa is simply just a more skilled blader, taking advantage of how to use his bay's best abilities and match out his opponents. As we get to the point where Tsubasa is dominating the fight, he does tell Ginga that their journey was very fun, almost alluding for Ginga to kind of remember those memories, which he does, and it does help him do better in this match. And it helps him do so good that it gets to a point where Ginga looks like he might be retaking the match. However, Tsubasa really interestingly uses his special move. Although Tsubasa can use his special move from the ground or from below, he specifically decides to do it from the ground this time, launching Pegasus into the air. And as you know, Pegasus, being a winged horse, loves to be above. And delivering its Star Blast attack, as Ginga assumes that this is going to be an interesting match. It has a very interesting scene where Tsubasa's eagle is actually beaten. However, we see that as Eagle's getting ringed out, there is purple and blue or white feathers of Pegasus mixed in between. This is to highlight a very important factor, as with Tsubasa being defeated, he is clapping for Ginga as Jinga's happy. But all of a sudden, Ginga realizes something very important. That he felt like he didn't really win this match, as Tsubasa had been coaching him and telling him things this whole match in order to make him slightly more competent, but also refine his abilities. Ginga realizing that for some reason Tsubasa was coaching him, in a sense that he also held back, as he could have used far more power and possibly could have beaten Ginga. As the ending segment shows that Tsubasa is obviously going to be playing a deeper role, as he talks to Ginga explaining that he didn't really teach him anything, and that he had it all himself. As if this was the only entry that Tsubasa was going to have into the series and not show up again, it could have been taught as a teacher role, but this is not what it was meant for. The next time Tsubasa re-enters the fray is this challenge match, where Kumosuke Kamada is dominating for the Dark Nebula, as they also need to get points to go to Battle Bladers. But as he's dominating all the other Bladers, all of a sudden an eagle jumps out of nowhere and begins to attack Rock Orso very well. This is clear that Tsubasa is the one who has entered this match, and more importantly, Tsubasa starts to drop hints at his true goals, as he calls out Kumosuke Kamada for being weak, especially because of the fact that he's a Dark Nebula Blader, which catches him and Doji off guard. But before anything else can happen, Kumosuke is unable to really do anything against Tsubasa, as Tsubasa doesn't just take the fight to him, he ends up beating him really swiftly. As this name dropping of the Dark Nebula has already piqued the attention of a certain person who likes to prick his fingers on cactuses in Doji. As Doji is very curious as to what Tsubasa could be aiming for, he doesn't have to wait long, as later that night, Tsubasa barges his way into the Dark Nebula headquarters. Alerted to this, Doji's actually curious, so instead of stopping him or having Tsubasa thrown out, he allows Tsubasa to meet him, which enters into one of the most, I think, hilarious scenes for me, as Tsubasa effectively comes in here to give his pitch as to why he needs to be hired by the Dark Nebula, as since he's so strong, they need competent people around, and clearly they don't have any, which just makes me laugh. As even Doji's taken back, surprised that that's what Tsubasa was aiming for, and he tells him they're not hiring and he wants him to leave. But seeing that Tsubasa isn't going to be able to get anywhere with that line of questioning, he starts to drop names, sort of, asking that he knows that there's a power here he wants to see, a power he thinks he can find here, and a blader that he knows is really strong, obviously referencing Ryuga. As this does catch the attention of Doji, wondering how Tsubasa could know so much, but also what is Tsubasa after. As this does lead to him deciding, well, he'll give him a shot. He does have a test for him, and the only bladers on hand, that being the three Kumade brothers. However, unfortunately for them, they're basically just a joke, as Tsubasa beats all three of them, battling him at once without really any trouble, and they were actually trying against him. The real challenge starts, obviously, when Yu steps up to battle Tsubasa, as effectively this would be a good challenge for Tsubasa, as at this point, Yu is technically the second strongest blader behind Ryuga. So if Tsubasa wants to prove himself, he should see, as he's technically the number one for the Dark Nebula in Ryuga's stead. But this fight completely changes, as Eagle's actually perfectly matched up against Flame Libra, delivering blow after blow, avoiding the sand trap altogether, and forcing you to actually use his special move to test how good Tsubasa is. But unfortunately for you, Tsubasa is in a whole league of himself. As most people would be afraid in the Inferno Blast, Tsubasa simply talks about Eagles being free, and has Eagle jump into the air, just so that it can dive into the Inferno Blast. This would lead to a massive collision, as Yu, who is unable to push out Eagle, as it's canceling out Libra's shockwaves, is basically at the mercy of Tsubasa. As Tsubasa casually says that it's not going to be in his favor, as with the dissipation of the Inferno Blast, both Eagle and Libra have tied. However, the one to be caught off guard is both Doji and Yu, as Yu does claim that this is a tie. He gets responded by to Tsubasa saying, was it? as he says he's still possibly holding back more power, just as he did against Ginga. This is enough for Doji, as Doji realizes that this guy is really skilled, and he does hire him as a Dark Nebula blader, as he's very curious to see what Tsubasa wants, as this is something that he needs to see for himself. The next time we see Tsubasa again is his journeys with Yu, technically, as both of them go after Jinga's friends at the behest of Doji. It's really interesting here because you see little bits of information from Tsubasa about his character, as he really doesn't want to have Yu tag along. I do see that this isn't just a idea of whatever his goals are. This is also a part of his personality, that up to this point, Tsubasa pretty much just does everything on his own to get jobs done the way that he likes. He doesn't really want people to tag along. He doesn't want people to interact with him. He just wants to get his job done in the way that he likes to, efficiently. But Doji, still being suspicious of Tsubasa, puts Yu with him on purpose, just so he can keep tabs on him, which is actually rather smart. As when Tsubasa does go after his opponent, he actually challenges Kenta, which actually has a really interesting dialogue that I want to bring up, and the fact that later DJ does call him a trespasser, although he gets angry and retaliates, saying that he was polite enough to wait till Kenta won and had the tournament finished. I do like this for a few reasons. I think the biggest reason is that Tsubasa really does show some character here, that he doesn't like to be compared to other people in the sense of negativity, when he's actually doing something rather noble in the case of waiting for Kenta to win first. And also the fact that he has enough pride as a blader to not interrupt this situation, believing that as Kenta needed to beat the other bladers to win the tournament, he respects him enough to allow him to finish in order to get his chance at him. As Kenta versus Tsubasa does take place, as Kenta accepts the challenge, but this is a challenge that Kenta was not prepared for in the slightest, as unfortunately for Kenta, he is actually no match for Tsubasa, as Tsubasa continuously attacks Sagittario. Sagittario at one point is unable to do anything, as Eagle keeps on diving down. Sagittario is simply at the mercy of Eagle, as Eagle attacks it back and forth, trying to defeat it. This leads into probably one of the more interesting aspects of Tsubasa, and the one that shows about his true character, his heart, as at one point Kenta turns away, starting to cry, as he feels really bad for Sagittario. However, it is Tsubasa who calls out to him to tell him to not look away, this being his way of telling him that if his bae hasn't given up, why is he giving up on it? And this rallies Kenta's motivation and brings him back to fighting, as when he finally stands up and decides to fight back against Eagle by launching a special move, Tsubasa actually cracks a half-hearted smile, happy to see that Kenta actually understands how serious he needs to get. Although this isn't anything for Tsubasa as a challenge, as he's able to cancel out Sagittarius' special move and defeat it, he was able to rally to Kenta's heart and get him to fight back harder as a blader. As the ending scene of that episode would obviously showcase Hyoma and Kenta leaving, I do like the fact that this showcased that Tsubasa really isn't like many of the other Dark Nebula bladers, but more importantly, he isn't like most bladers at all, as clearly he's trying to help out and kind of showcase to other bladers how to make them better, even if it's just giving them the motivation they need to succeed. The next time we'd obviously see is in the massive battle royal and tournament that would focus around it, as Tsubasa basically at this point isn't really developing his character, it's just mostly showing his strength, as a character like Benkei, although be it is stronger than Kenta, I do like the fact that Tsubasa defeating him is somewhat soundly, because it shows that Benkei still needs room to grow, but more importantly, it shows that Tsubasa is very skilled against multiple different types of opponents, as he is able to beat Benkei rather easily, and it showcases that Tsubasa is still in a whole league compared to most of the group, as he still only at this point needs to face Kyoya to challenge up to the original 4. As we enter the massive battle royal that I alluded to earlier, we have an interesting dynamic that is showcased between both Yu and Tsubasa, kind of displaying the fact that as Dark Nebula bladers, but more importantly displaying as their own blader sense. Both of them are individuals who technically don't need to team up because it is a battle royal, but it would seek them better if they chose to work together. Maybe a foreshadow alluding to the future, but in this case it was really good to see both of them fight alone, as Tsubasa and Yu are basically both caught off guard by the other opponents, effectively showing that if they're only going after Ginga, Kyoya and the others will just kind of take them apart, as this showcases that Tsubasa's biggest problem so far is he's only really felt challenged sort of from Ginga, but he still had held back, assuming that this best challenge would come from Ginga. As effectively the tournament in this battle royal continues, everyone is kind of matching in their own ways, as Tsubasa quickly changes his appearance to taking out Hyoma, and he does defeat Hyoma extremely quickly, showcasing that Tsubasa really is in a whole other league of his own, as he finally gets his chance to battle against Ginga one more time, as I do like this dynamic of them having clashing, and since Tsubasa has to take this a bit more seriously, Ginga can recognize that, as he even calls Tsubasa out on the fact that the last time they battled, he didn't feel like he had won properly and that he was holding back. And at this point, I like the fact that Tsubasa actually cracks a smile, and he gets ready, telling Ginga we're going to have some fun, assumingly meaning that if this battle was able to continue to take place, I do believe that Tsubasa would have fought Ginga at full power. This could have resulted in a defeat for Ginga, based solely on the fact that I think Tsubasa was willing to fight him with everything he had, and I do think Ginga would not have been ready, even with the Proto Stormbringer not being completed. But this is always of speculation. But the fact is, Tsubasa was ready to go. But the more important factor here is the fact that a figure was watching this whole battle take place, sizing up the competitors, and knowing to them he was going to be important later on. Factoring to the end of the battle, the thing that was shocking here was that Tsubasa and Yu both are technically defeated by Ginga with the Proto Stormbreaker that actually defeats Stormbringer that actually defeats all three of them, technically with Ginga being unable to control his power. But the reason this is so important is up to this point, Tsubasa believed that he was probably the best matchup against Ginga, but for Ginga to actually technically take out Eagle and Libra by breaking through both the Infernal Blast and being able to take out Eagle in that special move really did open Tsubasa's eyes a little bit to explaining that maybe Jinga's actually even stronger than he had given him credit for. The next time Tsubasa makes his move in his appearances is during the 100-man battle royal with the return of Ryuga. As the most important factor here is that Tsubasa watches the power that Lightning El Drago possesses, and it terrifies him to his core, as he watches how quickly Lightning El Drago destroys the other competition. It bothers him as he starts to show signs of cracking as to seeing the power that Ryuga actually possesses. This culminates in the final part of that episode, or the next part of this episode, where Tsubasa decides that it's finally time for him to go, as he doesn't really need to watch over Ryuga any longer, realizing that he needs something else that he has to do. This obviously alerts Yu, as Yu believes that obviously Tsubasa would be breaking orders by Doji, but Tsubasa doesn't care and tells him to take care of everything. But Yu, giving a smile, kind of alludes that he's not going to listen to Tsubasa. As with the maintenance of Mayor's seat in the Dark Nebula takes place, Doji allows this to happen in order for him to spring his own trap, but Tsubasa does not know. As Tsubasa is moving around the the Dark Nebula, to search for data, he finds something rather interesting. The data he was looking for was on Lightning El Drago, and when he finds it, he is shocked, as it gives him a rundown of what El Drago is based around and what it can do, but also watches a video of Jinga's first battle against Ryuga at the Dark Nebula before, which led to his defeat, and also showcasing how powerful it is. With the information he has required, he decides to take off. However, he is interrupted as when he makes it to the roof, Yu had already told Doji, and Doji already knew, so he had sprung a trap for Tsubasa on the roof, with all the Dark Nebula Bladers targeting him down. He is forced to deal with them together. And unfortunately, by himself, he's actually able to take out all the Dark Nebula Bladers, albeit without Yu and Doji jumping in. And as it seems that they're about to fight Tsubasa next, Ryuga's return would spark a different interaction altogether. As with Ryuga entering the battle, he decides to see what's going on, as Tsubasa is the only one who's still ready to go, but makes a proud declaration that he could take Ryuga as well, which leads to Ryuga actually deciding that if this is what he wants, he'll do it himself. As Tsubasa was prepared to battle Ryuga, however, he does not have all the information he'll need, which will be important in a minute. As effectively Tsubasa and Ryuga's battle takes place, it's actually very clear that Tsubasa does have an idea of what to do, as he launches his special move at first, but this comes in vain. This comes in vain for the fact that he does not understand how powerful and how the dark power works, so he gets neutralized, as Tsubasa makes a proud declaration that he has to stop him. This leads to Tsubasa finally rallying his strength to try out his counter stance, as he does use the attack, which does cancel out Ryuga's or El Drago's attack, but it's not enough to stop El Drago at all, and Tsubasa finally realizes he's far and over his head. As Eagle starts to get attacked and picked apart by El Drago, it's clear that he's at his wit's end, as Tsubasa is at this point mortified, as there's nothing really he can do except for struggle against Ryuga. As he's about to see Ryuga finish his dark move against El Drago, something amazing happens. Another Bey comes in, swooping in and saving Eagle, this being Burn Fireblaze. And as quickly as that had taken place, another character had re-entered the fray to save Tsubasa, this being Phoenix, who quite literally grabs him and jumps off a building, which is kind of hilarious and is important in the next development. As Tsubasa asks Phoenix who he is, because obviously he did save him and he wants to know who this guy is, Phoenix is the one who reveals that Tsubasa is a WBBA investigator, and he can't reveal his information to him, can he? Which obviously gets Tsubasa's attention. This leads to probably the most interesting development for Tsubasa, that being the interaction he has with Phoenix, that being really quick in the fact that he has a reverse talk, as he had the same situation with Ginga where he spoke to him and basically gave him lessons. Phoenix now tells him that there's a lesson he needs to conquer in order for him to understand why he cannot beat El Drago, as Tsubasa would then go ahead and try to attempt to figure this out. Tsubasa then appears to challenge Ginga before he can head to the final challenge match, because he needs to gain the 3,000 points. This is designed specifically because Phoenix had challenged Tsubasa, that in order to understand why Ginga might be the only one to defeat Ryuga, he would have to test out and meet his friends. So, effectively, this is going to happen as he goes after Ginga, but his friends step in, as Tsubasa does accept the challenge to battle against Ginga's friends. We get to see him run rimshot of the group, starting off with Hikaru and then moving into Benkei. Both of them put up a decent fight, but Tsubasa is able to defeat both of them. However, because Benkei had battled Tsubasa before, the interesting dynamic is after his battle with Tsubasa, Tsubasa is actually kind of surprised that he's actually stronger than the last time they battled, kind of showcasing the growth that had happened. As his battle with Hyoma showcases that although Hyoma really could have battled Tsubasa more seriously, he just wastes his time in order to allow Ginga to escape and get to the challenge match, which is a showcase of friendship mattering far more than victory. And finally, the battle against Kenta and Tsubasa is interesting because Kenta actually does know how to fight slightly better against Tsubasa. The more important factor here is that everyone rallies together, showing the importance of bonds, which allows Kenta to have even more power here and actually takes on and knocks Eagle back. Although Tsubasa does win this match, the whole point is that it shows that Tsubasa was able to beat most of these characters already pretty soundly, but thanks to their friendships and their bonds to grow stronger, it has made them even more powerful and allows them to fight back, not just being alone. As with Jinga's re-entry to challenge Tsubasa, showcasing that he was prepared as he would not leave his friends behind, he was ready to take on Tsubasa, as Tsubasa still hadn't understood his lesson yet. As Tsubasa does challenge Ginga, he declares that he wants to know how friendships and power work together and how it makes Ginga stronger, as Ginga is actually shocked that Tsubasa is actually asking him this, but it's not as important, as with Phoenix's re-arrival, the elements here are important, as Tsubasa eventually is faced by Phoenix, and Phoenix defeats him, showing that Tsubasa isn't even ready to defeat him. As he showcases this with the battle against Ginga, Tsubasa is simply an onlooker, who at different points of the battle learns different lessons, starting off with the fact that he watches Ginga struggle, and at this point when he thinks Ginga is defeated, he thinks that Phoenix is teaching him a lesson of finality, where he needs to defeat Ryuga, because if he cannot defeat Ryuga, this is what will happen, which makes Tsubasa slightly take his mission more seriously. However, with Ginga rallying back and fighting back even harder, he realizes that there's something special. But when he starts to see Ginga use all the moves of his friends and use their abilities, even seeing Eagle's diving crush attack, he finally sees what Phoenix was trying to tell him, that by having rivals and friends, he was able to build his strength and became so strong. This culminates with Tsubasa finally revealing himself as a WBBA agent, explaining that he went to the Dark Nebula to find what they were doing, and finally joining the friend group, as he gives it a solemn attempt to actually try and be a friend. But I do believe that Tsubasa has another arc that he still hasn't completed, which is important for the story. As we move in to the final stage of his story in Metal Fusion. Tsubasa's story in Metal Fusion culminates with his arc here, and it's important because this short moment with Kyoya in this episode is important because Tsubasa ends up leaving after Hikaru had been defeated by Ryuga, as he attempts to go after Ryuga himself. However, Kyoya does stop him, telling him that he knows what he's doing, as unfortunately and funny enough, Kyoya actually doesn't really care what he's going to do, but he will not allow him to ruin this battle, as Kyoya was going to battle Ryuga next, as he makes it very clear to Tsubasa that if he's a true blader, he won't interrupt this battle for principle, as he knows that Tsubasa really does want to stop Ryuga for the good of everyone, but this would come at the cost of Kyoya getting his ability to stop him himself. As we move forward to the reshuffle, where Tsubasa has to prepare for his battle against Ryuga, I think an important factor here is the fact that Tsubasa is trying to figure out how to defeat Ryuga, and it comes with an interesting ability of him realizing what he has to work on from his last battle, which is actually rather smart, but it misses a few key marks. But the key thing here is Tsubasa has a good strategy going into battling Ryuga, and the point here is, will it be enough? As will his power alone with Eagle be enough to defeat Ryuga? As interestingly, Tsubasa is heading out to battle Ryuga. The only one waiting at the end of the tunnel for him is actually Kyoya, as Kyoya is kind of proud in the sense that he thinks Tsubasa might be able to beat Ryuga first, but he tells him proudly that if he's going to do it, he's going to meet him at the semifinals, which does kind of shock Tsubasa, as it kind of shows that Kyoya does care a little bit at least, as he does have the ability to see the blader inside of Tsubasa. Tsubasa says he's going to leave it all out there. He steps into the light, as he does attempt and showcase that he's probably got the best strategy to beat Ryuga. But when Ryuga finally does see Tsubasa again, he does make a point of it that he doesn't have the strength to stop him, as only with aid was he even able to escape him in the first place, as he does tell Tsubasa he's going to throw away his future. This fight is pretty interesting, but it focuses more on Tsubasa's strategy, as he keeps dodging El Drago's attacks, realizing the last time he fought him was a mistake. He finally is able to get Ryuga, goading him into where he wants, as Ryuga believes by using his dark move he'll finish Tsubasa quickly, and by going forward, Tsubasa finally finds the opening he wants to use his counter smash. As this happens, it actually works out in his favor, as he's able to keep Ryuga's attack at bay, and finally by launching all of his power into this attack, he's able to cancel out the dark move, which results in Ryuga's El Drago wobbling. This proudly having Kyoya roar to Tsubasa that it's his battle now. Tsubasa does launch attack after attack, and is finally able to deliver his special move, which does land with thunderous strength. However, the Dragon Emperor was not finished, as from the darkness and the dark power erupting from Ryuga, he's able to turn the tables. As this amounts to a horrible factor is that Tsubasa was still not strong enough, because his power was just not in the league of Ryuga and El Drago. As El Drago horribly pins down and starts to disseminate Eagle, Tsubasa has his energy drained, as I do think this is done specifically, unlike with Hikaru and Iwa Tsubasa. The reason that this is so painful is that Ryuga is taking personal pleasure in punishing Tsubasa for even thinking he could challenge him in the first place. As Ryuga absorbs his energy, he enjoys it, and when he delivers the thunderous end of the special move, Tsubasa's screaming is more so from the depths of his body after being drained, but part of him resonates with the dark power, I do believe. As when the smoke clears, Tsubasa is left unfortunately in the pile of dust, as he's laying there beaten. As Ginga then rushes to his aid, it is sad to see, because he knows that Tsubasa did give it his best shot, but this is his results. As he does put him down, it's clear that this is going to be the end of the situation for Tsubasa now. With Tsubasa's return as a spirit to help Ginga protect himself, or protect Ginga during the fight against Ryuga, it was clear that there was something they figured out, each of them imparting a bit of information to Ginga, as basically this is for them to survive and aid, as telling Ginga that he's going to have to find a way to defeat El Drago, but doing it with their aid and their help by saving him. When Tsubasa does awake after Ginga defeats Lightning El Drago, it does end with a more tone of just him realizing that, hey, he needs to get better, as I do believe the next part of Tsubasa's arc will make a bit more sense, as he does end the story a bit different, but is not fully completed. And that's all I've got for you guys today. This is the first part. Part 2 will be coming out soon. But as always, this has been Brad from the Ad Army signing off. And for all of you out there, to sign on.